haven't been recording it. This is and so that's it of it. So both are not good indicators for this year's results. And so let's see what actually is the near-term outlook. And this is basically to confirm what was predicted in November last year for for the year 2019. You know that the global economy has faced headwinds. Growth rates have come down, have been adjusted down by IMF and World Bank, and the global trade also is down. The various countries or economic zones, they should put China here, US, Euro area, and Japan, and possibly China, or the only one that's showing some growth, but also showing decline from their higher growth rates previously. The ASEAN economy, the best performing economy is actually Vietnam and Thailand. Sorry, Vietnam and Philippines. And Malaysia is somewhere in between, above Thailand and Indonesia. And well, we are behind Indonesia also. So we are not doing that well. And we cannot boast anymore or brag that we are the leading country after Singapore in ASEAN for some time already. This is the forecast that was done by MIER on the right hand side, which was for this year is 4.5 was their prediction at that time, and for 2020 is 4.8. That means next year 4.8. This forecast was done in January, or rather in the National Outlook Conference. Inflation is, as you can see, down. Unemployment is, but not improving. Usually, higher employment will lead to higher inflation. Lower unemployment will mean, or higher unemployment means lower inflation. These are the various, again, components forecast by both BNM and MOF. We had our forecast for 2019 last year was as reflected there, and everybody is talking about consumption. As you can see, private consumption is very high compared to all the others. Import exports are doing a bit better, but domestic demand is not really pushing or upkeeping the economy. In terms of balance of payments, we are maintaining still a surplus. So that's very close to previous guidelines. The federal government position is very weak, and that's why the private consumption is lower. And for 2019, is still going south. So that's roughly the outlook from the point of view of our previous podcast. Let me just go back, go front a bit to show you this, which is the components of expenditure in GDP, GDP by expenditure, by purchase prices, purchasing prices, to show that this time around, based on a new model that we introduced, a single equation framework model, we are able to slightly suggest that what we said was 4.5 in January, or rather in December, we are essentially revising it a bit to reflect some optimism. At the bottom there, you can see that bottom there. Where is the pointer? At the bottom there. We just are adjusting it a bit. This one. Yeah. Okay. So that is if the media wants to record, that's basically our reconfirmation of what we did in November last year about this year's growth. We don't see any possibility of an uptick. Okay, with that, I go back to the earlier panel, the risks. These are the exogenous variables that we use in the single equation model to make this prediction for this current, based on this current quarter. And um, and those are essentially the changes to some of these exogenous variables. I'm better explain this term, lag GDP, because in a single equation model, it's a variance model that this year's growth depends very much on last year's growth to a certain extent, and to an even lesser extent, maybe the previous 2 years of growth. And so that can be factored in because there are cycles in the annual cycles over a 10-year period. So like is a good way of bringing back some realism to the forecast. The others are all, some of them are also lag. The the wealth in this case is related to I think capital formation and housing and all that like, are lumped together, and disposable income is dependent on wages and taxes. So these are can be predicted or can be derived from objective data, but then under the behavioral assumptions based on the sentiment surveys and so on and business conditions, we then adjust intuitively. All forecasters do that. They don't just 100% rely on the quantitative forecast. There is a because you have tacit knowledge, so you build up your knowledge, and the more experienced you are and doing in the same work over many times, you will be able to get a good understanding and feel of the economy. So that's where so-called forecasters' behavior comes in. In the rational expectations model, in fact, you can't predict very much because the government will always adjust to that and therefore moderate what you predict. So there's always a feedback cycle that automatically adjusts so that you have a downward pressure on your forecast. So let's go to the, well, this is just the sectoral contribution of it. Um, the MIER, the Treasury forecast, the Treasury forecast is 4.9 for this year, and they probably will confirm that in the Treasury report in October at the budget time in Parliament. Okay, that essentially concludes this part on the outlook and the surveys. I want to just very quickly do this because this is the current major risk to our economies, particularly our economy. Will some view says that we will be quite impacted by this. Um, Previously, in the first quarter briefing done by the previous forecasters, they had said they had done a so-called input-output analysis of the backward and forward linkages by various sectors, two-digit sectors, and then also has some inputs on they can do an impact analysis on the impact of the trade war between US and China on our own import and exports and so on. And they came to the conclusion that there are marginal impact, maybe some immediate impact like in palm oil, and because also of the EEC campaign against palm oil. But otherwise, everything were because while China may have been barred with respect to some of the EE products, semiconductors, aerospace products, and so on, we are compensated by American companies that are located here. So there is a kind of a evening out on the process. So the only thing I can conclude is to go through all these different scenarios, early scenario, and now adjusted for the worst case scenario. Um, and we have set up also the analysis is now a bit more rigorous on the basis of intercountry, our trading partners basically, using a improved IO model, maybe even CGE, but it's too early to really see the results of that. But we have a CGE model, which is one of the mainstays of the new research plan. Basically says that in the long run, we might benefit marginally when maybe some of the Chinese or American, what do you call, firms that have been producing in China might relocate. So there is a diversion both of investment and therefore trade. So eventually, in the long run, maybe 2 or 3 years down the road, so we might see some benefit from this trade war. But by that time, maybe that because the election is coming up next year for Trump, if he is still there, maybe he will be even worse of a anti-Chinese enemy person. But if he is replaced by Democrats, maybe things will come back to normal. I don't know. So that's one of the risk factors. So I want to conclude this part. This is the ongoing scenario, and compared to the worst case scenario, you'll find that Vietnam is one of the main beneficiaries. We do, in fact, benefit 0.0078 on imports, but on exports we are in the negative territory. And the worst case scenario pits us against ASEAN also in a very comparable way. But from US, there might be a slight dip in the worst case scenario. Okay, I think I will go through this. The conclusion in terms of policy, of course, is to say that it can gain in terms of both welfare and GDP by quite marginally, and that the domestic prices of imported products might might increase for domestic production and increase for imports because things have gone up a bit, weakened by our own weak dollar or ringgit. And so this if this trade war prolongs, then we have a problem. We probably then will be able to take advantage of it marginally from the trade diversion as well as investment. So okay, so that's the the first part. If you have questions, I know maybe you do have questions. Can we hold it for the next session? I have another 15 minutes to go through what would have been done downstairs uh, if the minister was able to come earlier, but he's not able to. So I have to do this up here without him, but we'll be continuing downstairs. This is basically based on your understanding of the long-term trend of the last few years, in fact, the last decade and 2 decades. So obviously, there is something wrong with our economy that we are always so far behind Singapore, South Korea, Taiwan, and Hong Kong, of course. And we were considered the fifth tiger by the middle of 1990s, but we have slipped further and became a cub because of the middle income trap, and therefore we could not reach the Vision 2020 target of a developed state. So when the PH government won, it talks about how to regenerate the growth of the economy and the distribution and impact on the population through the Shared Prosperity 2030, which is actually Vision 2020 extended to 2030 effectively. But they have got different strategies, perhaps more emphasis on people than on just business. So because of that change, and because lately the latest reports from IMF, the report from Fitch, which is the rating agency for our sovereign risk debt, and our debt is not still the overhang is very high, has said that while we are managing the economy on an annual basis and maintaining a sense of growth of between 4 to 5%, we have not dealt seriously enough with the structural issues. There are issues associated with the structure of the economy, the composition of markets, the issue of behavioral markets, both labor as well as the commodities market, and also the role of DFI. We are not now able to attract what we used to attract in the 90s, in the period of high growth in the first 10 years of the 1990s, before the 98 crisis. All of that were all related, while our fundamentals is strong, we are not able to do the kind of catch up or higher growth rate beyond 6% or 6% and above in order to achieve that status of developed status by 2020. So we kept falling behind. And that's the reason why we are interested to understand this time around how to how to achieve this regeneration of the economy and improve the welfare of the population. And this is what the PH government has announced. And in the white paper presented by the PM, uh, he talked about a shared prosperity 2030, which goes over 10 years, which forms the fourth outline perspective plan. Every perspective plan is 10 years, two 5-year plans. And we are now working also towards the 12th Malaysian plan and then the 13th Malaysian plan before 2030. So he says that we hope that the proposed concept of shared prosperity and planning can be further scrutinized by people at all levels and groups, and it will be brought to the grassroots level for feedback, to get feedback and to garner better ideas before it is concluded or included in the 12th and 13th Malaysian plan as part of the shared prosperity 2030 by 2030. So in other words, to recover developed status with a better distribution of income. And that are the two issues that always plagued our economy since 1970 or since independence. The NEP was introduced in order to get that kind of economic balance between races, between sectors, as well as rural and urban. The strategies of the shared prosperity are there, tackling income and wealth disparity, encouraging a progressive economy, which means that you have to achieve higher growth, you have to go for higher value and knowledge-based industrialization or services development. And also, we want to become the leading economy, maybe catch up with Singapore. So it's a tall order. But the strategies that have been announced are some of these: restructuring the economy continues, reducing the inequalities, improving business conditions, expanding to new sectors, and reforming human capital, that means education and skills, improving the labor market and wages, compensation, and improving social security or the social security system for the poor and the B40 and so on. So that's the intent of this government. We want to assist that government as we had assisted the previous government. I know my colleague is here, Gani also. Of course, we have MIR is not politically driven. It provides information as to opposition as well as to the government side and to business, of course. This is what has happened since 1988 when we start tracking the economy. When we, in the first phase, first 10 years, up to 1998, 97, 98, before the Asian financial crisis, we were the leading growth economy. We were on the verge in 1996 of becoming, in fact, one of the NICs, the newly industrialized countries, which are also called the Asian tigers. But eventually, of course, Raja will explain, Raja Rasya, that this is driven very much by inputs. That means by investment and by expenditure, inputs, by labor uh, coming in from the rural areas into the urban areas, by labor ability, of course, and then, of course, by foreign investment. So in this context, we mentioned growth at about 9% average for that 10 years, roughly. It was about 8.8. And then if you go by the notion of historical growth path, the most intuitive way, historical potential growth path, the most usual way done is just by eyeballing. That is, you just connect the top part, the highest part of the growth rate. That shows that that's you are capable of doing. But maybe we overestimate ourselves. We have fundamental economic factors, but because of the fact that we are so dependent on foreign investment, that and less on domestic investment, private sector involvement, and more also on state expenditure, that's where we maintain this growth path of about 10% or 10% historically if you extend it forward linearly. But of course, there are business cycles, so it goes around that potential. If the potential growth rate is above the real growth rate, then you get inflationary forces. If it is below, then you get deflationary forces. But the real result that we get is actually the red one. And the NEP target was 7.8 before. Okay, you can see here. This is the NEM target of 6% per annum in order to reach Vision 2020, this one. And then the NEP, in fact, we put it at 7.5, but it has been adjusted upwards because of essentially what do you call compound factors, growth compounding. But after 1998, you then see the secular decline of our growth rates away from the growth potential. Even just moving around the 6%, but actually you take the trend again on a eyeballing method, you see that they are trending towards this line. There was when the NEM was launched and Najib was the prime minister. There is an uptick based on quantitative easing with our own expenditure. He had the first Q1, which is he injected about 62 billion into the economy, and some of them are actually promises only, and then continue to the with the what do you call what is the cash payment called BRIM expenditure by giving cash to the households. And so the result is that this growth rate has gone up at the beginning of the NEI period, but is after that, because of the impact on the budget and the private sector crowding out even, then has gone down, and the external sector today. While we have exports that are net surplus on the current account, we are suffering on the capital account and services account. So this is, we have now projected it, and it may still go down. Of course, it may go up in the next by the next year, 2020. So, how do we therefore get out of this mess, of this low-income trap? Means that you have to introduce a set of plans, which is in the SP 2030 plan or expectation. But still, we do not know. At the moment, there's no lead as to what this plan is all about. The people are still having forums, and they also have population plan congresses and so on to get inputs from both the Malay groups as well as the non-Malay groups and all the whole country and academics. So what we, because of our interest in this process, we then introduced this crouching tiger strategy. We want to be a tiger, but we are not there. We are just crouching to leap into that phase. And we have to leapfrog. And we cannot just go in the normal track like this way. The normal track will pull us down like that, all the way down to maybe even negative when there's a world recession. We are definitely vulnerable to a full trade war, especially with the Deutsche Bank going to melt down as of now. They have what 45 trillion in derivatives that they are exposed to, and they are going to take a hit. And that will affect the financial system. Banks will close, and then it will affect also loans and therefore enterprises and employment and so on. So that is what we want to avoid. If we can do something about it, then we are well able to then overcome that shock. So we set up 8 research groups to try and understand this whole process. These are the 8 research groups. And of course, there may be beyond that some others, but the first is in fact the Tiger Research Group. The Tiger Research Group is not because we are going to become the 5th tiger, although we use the word crouching tiger, but Tiger stands for basically technology-based industrialization for growth and economic restructuring. In other words, we are looking at restructuring the economy in order to achieve and maintain growth. So that's called Tiger, and that's the research group, and that's the group that will explain now. in the world that is doing the modeling for us to do both the growth and distribution analysis and wage and labor impacts. The next group is also the one that is very active, and this afternoon you will see the result, or this later this morning, you'll see the result of what we have done. The Industrial Research Bureau, I will explain that. Then the others are all other researchers that are consequent, and technology and innovation is, in fact, an underpinning of the whole Crouching Tiger project. Renewable energy is very important. The environment is very important. The digital economy and fintech and so on are all, and other services, knowledge-based services are important. And agriculture is something that we must regenerate in order to address our food security problems. So let me just quickly go through what these groups are all about. The primary focus of this cluster is to study how the Malaysian economy can achieve equitable growth. It is all in the, you can refer to your text, papers. And without sacrificing distributional concern, in fact, improving greater equality, especially the B40, B50. This cluster conducts research on growth within a macroeconomic framework using both econometric as well as input output and SAM for distribution concerns and CGE, dynamic stochastic general equilibrium models as well as our workhorses. So we'll be reporting our forecast, our industry surveys results, all from there. The okay. The rest, before I talk about the industrial research group, these are the studies that we are studying under various groups in among the 8. Study with for impact of 5G by MCMC Commission, future of the service sector in the digital age from MITI, review of the third industrial master plan. MITI also asked us to bid for it. We are studying ourselves a high wage economy, how to see wage levels go up in real terms as against inflation and employment. We are also looking for the domestic trade inflation model, but we are doing already started with the cost of living index. And then also to get at the welfare part, other than income and growth of GDP, we also want to talk about the welfare impacts of these growth processes on living standards, and therefore, in this case, the Genuine Prosperity Index. It used to be called Genuine Progress Index, but in honor of the SP 2030, we changed the progress to prosperity. Then of course, we put together this Crouching Tiger project, which I will explain after this, and I'm like a study project, which is under consideration. This is how those groups and projects relate to each other. And I don't have to go through this. TIGER, as I said, it stands for Technology-Based Industrialization for Growth and Economic Reform. Okay, so you can study this. I am expanding our associate fellowships, associate research fellowship. Used to have only about 5 or 7 maximum to about 50. To include private sector economists as well as academic economists to run our projects together with us, our staff here. And we've got to pay for them. We are aggregating a research fund to fund 5,000 to 10,000 short-term projects based on our program rather than their own interest for their academic publications. So the policy research is our business. So those I don't have to go through, but this is important. The output of the Tiger projects allows us to inform the work of the industry research. By undertaking pre-feasibility studies and also undertake project advisory services with a focus on industries in several of these high-tech, high-growth, high-value added sectors. Some have contributed to us, of course, like oil and gas, but we want to go into renewable energy, solar energy, biogas, whatever, waste energy, and so on. Aerospace and defense. Our neighbor is the Minister of Defense, so we just can or ask him to come over and join us. Micro devices, logistics, transport and logistics, fintech, new materials, AI, telecommunications, robotics, and also agriculture, particularly on halal. So we are catering to the requirements of clients who will seek to promote domestic and foreign investments in these high-tech areas. And some of these are mentioned, as mentioned above. For the last 3 months, which is a very short period, MIER's consultants have been working from 9 in the morning to about 2 in the evening or in the morning to come up with these projects. We dub these Crouching Tiger projects, which are divided in, and they are driven by essentially the MI research groups, those areas that are identified in the research projects. And also then we look for potential investors, research partners, R&D developers, governments even, and so on. So what we have seen to be the one that is most important for us is actually the so-called leapfrog projects, which are short nickname Salatutoyim. By the way, Salatutoyim is not an Arabic word. It is a combination of an Arabic word, the first part, which means good relations, and the second part, which is Thai, which means smiling girl in Thai. Yeah? And these are essentially, we call it Salatutoyim because the acronyms refer to the 7 leapfrog technologies to transform the economy of Malaysia. Some of them are we know already. Others are maybe just being taught under 4.0 and IR 4.0. So this includes the electric car, which we have presented already to the PM. And PM says go ahead and do the feasibility study and then come back in October. Then we will endorse whether we become a national car, the third national car, or just another electric car company. And that has gone quite far forward. We have also the funds to go for it. The feasibility study has become a business plan, and this will be one of the first to be implemented, hopefully, and will be launched at the National Outlook Conference by the Prime Minister. Second, we have the solid state hydrogen. Okay, yeah. Ini skip. If the minister comes, masukkan dia ke. The minister is about to come. I got only 3 minutes. These are we got work in the hydrogen economy using solid state hydrogen, which is a new technology to stabilize the hydrogen and storage and so on, so that it can be used in cars, in buses, in ships, in trains, without having to compress them into liquid hydrogen and therefore become very volatile. So this is a breakthrough by a Malaysian resident in Canada who is now a Canadian citizen, but he wants to come back and do something, so he brought that technology. But he's not a technologist himself. He's actually a lawyer. So there's hope for Tony here and Jason. Third is the 5G. We are talking about a national 5G rollout as a facility, as one of the objects. So when we have 5G, then autonomous cars and all the digital economy users going to be, including online banking, virtual banking, and so on, will come into play because the facility is available. And we can compete also with the likes of Singapore, which is currently the main terminal. Fourth is biojet fuel from palm oil. We have got that with some offtake from China. Agrodrome technologies to bring the Cameron Highland climates to the lowland, to the rural areas, especially abandoned land that Nash has about 1 million acres of land to be developed using this agri technology. And we can grow any crop because the climate can be simulated within the dome. And robotics to be used, as well as big data for managing those crops. Then we have the Hyperloop high-speed rail of 1,000 kilometers per hour. So that if you have such a loop, such a train, not the ECRL, which is only about 180 kilometers, between Port Klang and Port Kuantan or Port Tanjung Agas, which is being developed, it is only a half hour for the containers. That means we effectively have have shrunk the country. That means that it doesn't take 4 hours to get from side to side. So ships can go to Port Klang, then the containers put on this freight train, cross over there, the other ship is waiting to take. And of course, there's storage in between. And somewhere in between is what we are proposing a kind of a inland cargo hub plus a transport hub inside your area in the Malaysian Vision Valley 2.0. And Azigani is the chairman of Samdabi Properties. Got a lot of the activity of this Hyperloop plus Agrodome plus the national rollout would be located in either Bandar Anzac or in this hub. The other two, sorry, my God. Let me quick go through this. Refer to your notes at the moment. There are two sets of other MOUs that we have to sign, which is part of our go to the Crouching Tiger. One facility investors or funders, and there are about 7 of them, which we have identified, and they come to us, and one of them is here, in fact, who has already agreed, and even the amount and the amount of contribution to MIER. So that is very good news. Go back. So at the top there, funder investor, we have a European Economic Development Council represented by TRMC. We are signing the NDA because this is quite a huge fund. So we will be negotiating what projects for them to fund and so on. We need an NDA, so we will sign that NDA. The others are all big investors with big funds, yeah, except number 5 is not, it's small here in terms of the Asia Pacific Bank, but it has the whole of China behind it. So it's therefore also very big. ASG is here, Alka Corporation is here, and One Nasi Group is also here, which is an international conglomerate, but not in Malaysia. So he's very excited to be more patriotic and coming back to fund development projects in the country. He will be signing with us. Then below the facilitators, the agreements that are with departments like DOSM, with groups like the High Value Farming Group in UPM, who's here to be signing. Science Discoveries is interested in setting up museums, especially the first, which is Islamic Science Museum. That is part of our popularization of science and STEM and so on. And to make people, Malaysians, more interested in TVET and STEM and not just do play around with music and so on, although it's also important. Future skills, again, we need to look at what are the skills needed under 4.0. The Malaysian Innovation Hub is a group linked to China and China Research Institute. FedTech, which is a group also, an R&D group linked to the US companies and research houses, including Silicon Valley. They are not signing today, but they have already shown interest and shown us a draft. Then the TJA Solutions is developing the Tanjung Agas project, which we are signing. Agri Agile Business is looking at health issues and helping the Minister of Health, that's why he's here, to implement the National Health Reform proposal that must be done before the next election. Otherwise, he won't survive. And then, which I say to him after, to reinforce that. And then BGR Capital on graphene, which Felda was interested but lost money and lost interest. While NASE is brought a project for us to look into together with Ocean Sand in Maldives for their own economic development, including renewable energy. And EduSpec is another STEM training organization that we also want to get involved. Okay, I will then end there. These are the list of MOUs that are with us. They will be in the various states of readiness. 14 of them will be signed downstairs. So now we've got to go down all slowly, not slowly, quickly, but quietly to receive the minister. Thank you very much.
Thank you,